When picking a game to give our attention to, we often don't think too deeply about it. Many of us simply pick what we're most familiar with. If you played the same game every day at 6 p.m., what would make you want to switch to another one all of a sudden? If I had one word to summarize the games we choose to play at times like this, it would be replayability. For me, a replayable game must have one of these three factors: the feeling of progression, intentional replayability, or it's just an amazing game. I consider progression to be a very tricky factor to judge in a game. In single-player experiences, progression is typically leveling up, making it through the story, and beating bosses. In multiplayer games though, it's usually based on rank. At first, there's not much of a difference with these two types of progression. If you play the game well, you can go further in it. Some great examples of this can be found in Soulsborne games, where you must go through great challenges but are often rewarded just as greatly. In Elden Ring, for example, you'll go through the game defeating bosses and progressing your character, who you can customize to be whichever build you'd like. At times, things will get tough, but you know if you improve your skills, you will progress. Other great examples of this style can be found in nearly any RPG game though. Personally, I'm a big fan of this and love how unique progression feels at times. When it comes to multiplayer games though, things get a bit tricky. In most cases, you'll have a base skill level throughout all multiplayer games in a certain genre. This usually just comes down to things like aim, communication, and basic game sense related skills. For example, you'll be hard pressed to find a skilled CSGO player who isn't at least somewhat competent at Valorant. Of course, if you put a Rocket League player in a League of Legends game, for example, they might struggle, but in general, a good gamer can learn fast. The issue with multiplayer games lies in the factor of comparison. In most RPG games, you take things at your own pace. Just because your friend is further ahead than you in one, doesn't mean they're necessarily better than you at it. On the contrary, being higher ranked than someone in a competitive game quite literally means you are better than them. Naturally, this makes you want to play the game a lot so you can be considered good. This replayability is one of my least favorites since it has very little to do with your own enjoyment. While there may be exceptions, this competition usually breeds a lot of negativity and turmoil between friends, especially when someone has a bad game or does something wrong. Progression stops being about actually getting better and more about proving people right or wrong. There are a few cases where this competitive aspect might be very fun for some people though, especially in things like fighting games since you directly control whether you win or lose. I even had an era of my life where I wanted to be a pro Smash player, which clearly didn't pan out, but I still had a great time. The next, and in my opinion the most important element of replayability, is the actual intention of it being a factor in the game. I know that sounds confusing, but this is what I mean. Games like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, and Minecraft all get this feeling just right. These games don't really have an ending like most do. Sure, you might be able to complete all these story-based content, but much of the game is dependent on what you want it to be. Some people want to collect everything there is to get in Animal Crossing, while others just like to play a little bit every day. If you want to beat Minecraft by fighting the Ender Dragon and just calling it a day, you can do that. But if you want to create a never-ending world with amazing builds and civilizations, you can do that too. I'm not sure if you can really call this replayability since these games don't really end, but I'm gonna count that anyway. The reason this is my favorite element of replayability is the fact that you control your fun. It doesn't matter what your friends want to do in their game, because everyone's experiences will be different anyway. These simulation games aren't the only ones with intentional replayability though. I mean, there's literally an entire genre dedicated to that, roguelikes. Honestly, I don't have that much experience with them, but they're basically adventure games where you have to restart from the beginning each time your character dies or fails to meet the main objective. RPGs are also great examples of intentional replayability. Typically, you'll have a bunch of different classes you can make your character, not only that, but also various weapons each class can use. And while certain games do require you to restart in order to change classes, many like Elden Ring basically let you completely change your character via respeccing. Many RPGs also include a New Game Plus feature in them, giving you new content on a second playthrough. The quality of these can vary depending on the game, but in general it's always a good sign that the developers care about replayability. Now would be a good time to mention one of my favorite and most replayable games of all time, Bloons TD6. Technically it's considered a tower defense game, but that genre doesn't really have much in the mainstream besides Plants vs Zombies, so I'll only be talking about Bloons. If you somehow haven't played it before, you basically have an army of monkeys that you use to stop Bloons from getting through the map. The replayability of this game needs no explanation, with it boasting dozens of maps with plenty of different game modes and difficulties. If you could give me only one game to play while trying to pass some time, this would probably be it. Also, did anyone else play Bloons TD5 in the middle of class in elementary school? I know I usually talk about mainstream games, but those websites like Cool Math Games used to be the best back in the day. In general though, there's nothing wrong with intentionally making your game replayable, and I think that it's something that has only gotten better over the years. And while game developers are definitely focused focusing on it more, I think sometimes they don't even need to. There are a select few games out there that are so well made and entertaining that they're replayable just from the quality. I'm not really talking about any specific genre or anything either. These games can range all the way from Super Mario 64 to Red Dead Redemption 2. There aren't any specific requirements that need to be met to have this pristine quality, but you can kind of just tell when a game is like this. I will say though, one company reigns supreme in consistently making the highest quality releases: Nintendo. Let me preface this point by saying that I have certainly not played every mainstream release from every company, so there is heavy bias in my words. However, you cannot deny the replayability of the Mario, Pokemon, and Zelda franchises. Honestly though, most of these games have no true elements of replayability aside from Pokemon maybe. Every Mario game is designed to be a single experience with one ending, but for some reason, we all go back to it. It's not like these games are particularly hard or anything either. As much as I'd love to give an answer on why I find them so replayable, I really can't give one. Sometimes we just need a reliable game to play when you've had a hard day or just want to relax. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've picked up a Pokemon game just because I wanted something familiar to play. Well, I guess I did just end up answering my own question kinda, and I've also discovered another element to replayability along the way. Every so often we form a bond with a game without even realizing it. Many times it's a positive memory from childhood and we remember those days by playing a certain game. Other times that bond might be more of an addiction and you find yourself unable to stop queuing for games on ranked. Your bond might be held within Minecraft if you ever had a big server with friends. Perhaps you made memories getting wins in OG Fortnite and posting them to your Snapchat story. And who knows, maybe you had some classic memories in party games like Among Us or Jackbox. It doesn't really matter what game it is for you, since the memories are what makes them so replayable. So the next time you take a look at someone's Steam profile and see this, consider all of the factors I've mentioned so far, because replayability comes in many forms. I went into this thinking that there were only a few reasons as to why games can be replayed, and now I know that there are far more than I thought. With the prices of games rising by the day, it's becoming more and more important to make quality investments into games. Of course, many of the most replayable multiplayer games are free, but for those looking for deeper experiences, picking the right games is important. Fortunately, some of the most replayable games of all time are quite cheap, since they're made by much smaller studios. I found myself putting tons of hours into cheaper games like Stardew Valley and Bloons, far more than some of the AAA games I've played before. Regardless if you agree with my viewpoints on what makes a game replayable, I think we can all agree that having some comfort games is essential. After all, how good is a game like Valorant gonna be at relaxing me after a long day? I'd much rather hop into something like Animal Crossing, Zelda, or pretty much any story-based game. Over the past year, I've developed a philosophy around gaming where I really try to never be angry at a game. I kinda realize that life is full of real struggles and hard work, and losing a game is one of the worst reasons to lose your temper. I still play games that might make me sweat a little bit, don't get me wrong, but in general, I'm a big fan of comfort games these days. And while having some of these in our rotation can be amazing, don't forget to give some other games a chance too, because who knows, maybe you'll find some new games to fall in love with. Despite everything I've said so far, replayable games are certainly not the benchmark that defines what makes a game good. It is simply a welcome addition that will extend the life of an already fun game. As great as the experiences I've had on replayable games are, a good portion of my personal favorites are not that replayable. I've left a list of some of my favorite games of all time in the description if you want to open that in another tab, but some names on the list include Persona 5, Undertale, and Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. All of these games were pretty much amazing first-time experiences, but they certainly didn't hold as much enjoyment for me on a second run. This isn't the case for everyone though. I just wanted to add a little bit of a counter-argument to the praise I've been giving replayability. That being said, just as many games on my list, perhaps even more, are replayable. Pokemon, Mario, Animal Crossing, all of these games left some of the biggest impacts on me as a child and beyond. Replayable or not, hopefully this video helped you understand a little bit more about why you like playing certain games, and maybe even made you appreciate them just that much more.